Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today for exploring the Master of Divinity here at Harvard Divinity School. My name is Margaret Okada Sheck. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions here, and I'm thrilled to lead us off. I'm going to give a very short presentation on the Master of Divinity program itself, and very briefly around admissions and financial aid, and then lead it off to Dean Teddy Hickman-Maynard, the Associate Dean of Ministry Studies, as well as our amazing student panelist. So Harvard Divinity School was founded in 1816 as the first divinity school in the United States and is the most religiously pluralistic in the world. So if you are incredibly excited about pursuing your graduate education in a place where there is an incredible diversity of classmates, people who are maybe like you or maybe nothing like you, and coming from all of the world's faith traditions, as well as the folks who have no faith tradition at all. We educate students in the academic study of religion in preparation for ethical leadership, religious literacy, and service-oriented, mission-driven work. The Master Divinity itself, the way that I sort of articulate it is that, how law schools have JDs, medical schools have MDs. The Master Divinity is the professional terminal degree of a divinity school. For us, it's 3 years full time. It does require folks to live full-time residency here. And folks learn the arts of ministry, areas of preaching, pastoral care, community organizing. One of the really important aspects of this is that students are able to link theory and practice through the requirement of 2 field education placements. And students are really able to pursue a wide range of fields where ethical leadership and interfaith competency is an asset. And what I also want to say is, and I'll talk about it, is institutional grant aid is available for this program. As I mentioned, so ministry at HDS is incredible. We define it with a lowercase m. It's incredibly broadly defined and really is about a call to serve others, whether it's through a traditional ordination in a Protestant Christian religion or in chaplaincy or nonprofit leadership. Some folks do end up going into PhD programs afterwards. And really, students are trained in the arts of ministry while they're reflecting theologically on what they're doing. Field education is incredibly broad and diverse, and I'm excited for Dean Teddy to speak more about this later. And students are able to have over 100 different placements to choose, and students are also able to create their own site as well. In terms of institutional grant aid, we do offer a small pool of merit aid. This is no applicant has to do anything additional. It's really based on the strength of the applicant pool. And merit awards are generally a full tuition grant with a modest stipend of $12,000 to $20,000, which is the range. But the vast majority, and again, 90% of our students in the MDiv and MTS programs get financial aid. The vast majority of that is need-based aid. So the financial aid application is required, and that will be sent to all MDiv and MTS students after you submit the application in mid-January. You have about a month to complete that application. We have for 3 levels of need-based aid. It would be ranging from 75% tuition grant to a full tuition grant and a full tuition grant and a modest stipend. Further information will be hosted on other virtual events and other opportunities as well. The application for admission for entrance in fall 2025 is now available. It's a pretty straightforward application. We'll offer a lot of Ask Me Anything events, as well as other opportunities, as well as the virtual open house for prospective students that you can learn more. The application deadline is January 9th. We do require interviews, and so interviews will be sent out to a select group by between late January to and early February, or actually through February. And we release all admissions decisions by mid-March 2025. I know I went through this incredibly quickly. We are offering a ton of other opportunities to connect with us. Please do sign up for our Connect form, as well as email us with any other questions that you may have. So I would like to turn it over to my colleague panelists, Dean Teddy Hickman-Maynard, who is the Associate Dean for Ministry Studies, and our student panelists.
Thank you so much. I want to thank our entire admissions team, and especially Margaret and John for setting up this wonderful opportunity for us to have this conversation. I also want to thank those of you who sent in your questions. And so the most important thing today is for you to hear from these students. There are questions that certainly I can provide some clarity on when possible, but mostly I want you to hear from MDiv students who are here in the program and let them speak. If there anything that you don't hear tonight, that your questions weren't answered, as Margaret said, you can reach out to us, you can reach out to me. But I want to keep this session focused on these wonderful students. I'm so grateful to have three excellent students, Shariah Anderson, Jack Boken, and Tess DeFrochot. And I am going to start with the first question that I have in my list is, what are the career paths for those who are in the MDiv program? And I think we have three very different approaches to ministry represented by these panelists. So I think that's a great place to start. I want to have each of you tell our guests what it is, how do you define your ministry, what it is that you do, and a little bit about how you've been able to resource yourself for that ministry here at HDS. And I'm looking at the order you are on my screen. Shariah, you are first. So I'm going to ask you to start.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Like he said, my name is Shariah. I'm a third year MDiv. Just kind of getting into your question. I feel like I have even complex interests. I'm a business owner. I have a Christian apparel brand where it focuses on apologetics, which is defending a faith or a theology. I'm also a chaplain for the women's basketball team at the college. And so those are kind of like my areas of ministry, focusing on fashion, but also chaplaincy in the sports context. Outside of that, I am a practicing Protestant Christian. And so very much so interested in ministry. And so those are kind of like my three areas of focus.
Thank you, Shariah. Jack?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Happy to be here with everybody. Just got to say, this is full circle. I remember attending these webinars a few years ago and just being like so eager and enthusiastic. And here we are, final year. So if you're watching right now, it's possible. And I'm excited for you. My ministry is yoga education. You know, I've had a yoga school for about 15 years and really pleased with the work we've done, but I really wanted to bring more academic rigor, more integrity to our school. And so I thought I was coming here to get a PhD in yoga. That was like my vision. But thankfully, I connected with great advisors like Dean Teddy and others who helped me realize actually that, you know, highly academic path is not for me, but rather the MDiv allows me to kind of bring the practical element as well as the academic and mix the two together. So the program has been perfect. And as soon as I finish, I go back to our yoga school and keep sharing and doing what I love.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Yeah.
Tess, please let us know about your ministry.
Thanks, Dean Teddy. So I previously I worked at a workaround cooperative and we sold urban farm supplies. So I talked to a lot of people about their chickens and bees and urban farming practices. And then I farmed for myself for a year in California. And during that time, I encountered a lot of climate distress and kind of my own climate distress was growing. So my ministry has really been developing language around climate distress and gaining some chaplaincy skills to bring back to those communities, because I really think those are some good adaptive solutions to work in small scale community cooperatively, working with the land. So thinking about how to do that right and how to bring some chaplaincy skills there.
Wonderful. And there's another question here about how the MDiv program balances academic work with preparation for ministry. So I'm going to go in reverse order now and ask Tess to talk about how have you been able to explore your area of ministry, both in the classroom and through field education?
That's a great question. I think each student balances it differently. I found it was really helpful to do the field education, as I'm really excited about that component about the MDiv. And I worked in the Harvard Divinity School garden for a year and kind of built up my own program to try to apply what I was thinking and writing about to work in the garden with peers. And that was really helpful. And I also did a unit of CPE, which is pretty classic for students. So that's clinical pastoral education to kind of gain some basic chaplaincy skills. And so I think it's really on each student to kind of strike the balance they want, how academic they want to get. And there's also a lot of opportunities for practical projects in courses. And I think that the chaplaincy classes are expanding, which is really exciting.
Thank you so much, Tess. Jack, how about you?
Yeah, for me, this program has just been incredible. As I mentioned, I thought I was coming here to head towards a PhD, to go the academic route. Got some guidance from great mentors and realized the MDiv was the right path. And it's just been a perfect fit. The way that the language requirement fits together with the field ed, with the courses, and then sharing it with our yoga community. So for me, I've been studying Sanskrit, which is the language of the yoga, all the yoga scriptures. And then in class, we're doing classes on Bhagavad Gita and Yoga Sutras and Upanishads and all these great yogic texts. And then the field education I'm doing my third one right now. You only need to do two, but I'm doing three because I love it. And so I've done one, there's an ashram, there's a temple right here in Boston called ISKCON. And so I've been serving there and actually even moved in because I figure soon I'm going to be back in small town Canada and I'm not going to have access to these opportunities. So I'm all in. I moved into this ashram, into this temple to serve, and then also did a summer field education in India. Was just an incredible opportunity, living at an ashram there, serving, connecting to the culture, feeding the villagers. It's just been so enriching. And so all of that is just really fits so well with the culture and the values of our yoga school. And everything I've been learning, we get on Zoom calls every week with our yoga students and we're sharing. And yeah, it's been pretty incredible.
Thank you so much, Jack. And Shariah, please, can you share with us how have you balanced your academic preparation with your field work?
Absolutely. I would say I'm definitely more of like a practical person. Coming to Harvard, I knew that I wanted to do a lot of research just on like the history of Christianity, but I also have a legal background. I worked in the legal field for a year before coming to HDS. And so I did a field ed placement doing chaplaincy for people who are experiencing homelessness. And so I did that for a summer and an academic year. And I think because I was just really passionate about it, I felt like it was a good balance between like my schoolwork as well as my interest in this placement. In addition to that, I did a unit of CPE this summer as well. And I did that at a hospital. And I really got to do a lot of justice work around Black women's health. And so I think just because HDS offers so many different field ed placements that are within interests of students, I think you'll figure out what that balance looks like. I think the thing that has been most time consuming for me is being a chaplain for the basketball team. And that looks like going like on a game day and just like giving like something inspirational to the team, but also being at their practices and things like that. But I think at that point, like I think getting away from HDS for a time, it's also kind of rewarding. So I think finding that balance between like, I have this time to do all this like rigorous like research while also then like going away and doing things like way outside of HDS, it creates this balance that seems to be very like needed and helpful. And so those are all the ways that HDS kind of has provided those opportunities.
I'm gonna ask us to back up a little bit. We've heard about what you're interested in and how you've used field education and scholarship to pursue it. But I want you to back up to your decision-making process. What attracted you to HDS? What made you choose HDS? And particularly if you were deciding between HDS and another divinity school, what was unique about this place that made it your choice? Jack, would you mind going first?
Yeah, happy to. I guess, I mean, one thing I love was that it was so multi-religious. There was such a diversity of students who come here together. And of course, many divinity schools, for example, might be more focused on Christianity, which is beautiful. But for myself, studying Hinduism, this was just one of the very few opportunities to be in a divinity school, to be in an environment like this, and yet study Hinduism and that yoga tradition. So that was important for me. I also love the field ed opportunities. A lot of divinity schools, there's like one requirement, and I could see that this was like something, very, significant, a big part of the program, the fact there's a minimum of two. And then truthfully, the financial aid support, for myself to be able to step away from our yoga business for 3 years and have, a lot less involvement. And there's been some impact doing that, of course. So to have the help with the financial aid, which is amazingly generous at HDS, was a factor as well.
Tess, how about you? What went into your decision-making process?
So I am not the only one of our peers who found out about HDS through the Harry Potter and the Sacred Text podcast, which, if you don't know, was started by two alumni. And I didn't grow up religious. I didn't really go to church or anything. And so I really had no exposure to thinking theologically or to sharing space with people in a spiritual sort of way. So when I heard this podcast, I was like, what are they doing? Like, that is the way that I love to think. Like, they are not avoiding critique, but they're aware of the worst, but they're really like aiming for the best and trying to construct this future. And so that's how I found out about HDS. I'm not sure if I would recommend this, but I only applied to HDS. I was like, it's religiously plural. They seem to accept people who are not even sure what they are, which is me. I would love to go there. I was between that and applying to a shepherding program, like literally shepherding. So that's how I found HDS, but it's been a really welcoming, accepting place that helps like urge me to think spiritually and theologically, and understands that it's okay. I don't come from a certain background.
And Shariah, did you apply other places or was HDS your only choice?
HDS actually was my only choice because I wanted God to be clear about if this was for me or not. And so I only applied to Harvard, but also I was very attracted to the dual degree program because I wanted to go to law school as well. And so I looked into that. And I also wanted to matriculate amongst people who did not believe the same thing as me. I felt that that's where I would really like learn more about other people and about what I believed. And so, yeah, I was really excited about just going to Harvard. So, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the dual degree program, and I wanted to answer that question. One of the questions that was sent in ahead of time was whether or not the MDiv program does support, it's actually called concurrent degree, but don't worry about the technical name for it. But yes, we do work with students to create programs with a number of the other professional schools that are a part of Harvard University. The most popular ones are people who do a concurrent degree with Harvard Divinity School and the Kennedy School of Government, whether it's a Master's of Public Policy or a Master's of Public Administration. We have quite a number of students who are in the law school who will do their JD and MDiv. We also have students at the School of Education who will do an MED and an MDiv. I am not aware of anyone who has done the MBA and the MDiv. I'm not even sure. So that's a question for admissions. I don't know of anyone who's done a joint MDiv MBA, but certainly for the public policy, School of Education, School of Public Health, and the law school, those tend to be the schools that our students are also interested in. But those are separate admissions processes, so you have to get into both schools, and then we work with you on laying out a program that works for you. Going to the questions in the Q&A. So I have some pre-submitted questions, but I also want to let people know that you can use the Q&A box to ask live questions. And I want to go to the second question I see there is, how challenging has it been to balance the demands of academic coursework with the field education experience? This is a very important question. And so I'll ask, anyone can jump in here who wants to tackle that. How have you been able to balance academic work with what is admittedly a very robust field education requirement?
I can jump in. First, I just wanted to say I also only applied to Harvard. So it's all three of us. We knew what we wanted. And I also was going to mention I have an MBA, but not concurrent here. But the two go very well together, I will say, with the MDiv. As for balancing the academic work and the field ed, I think it comes down to having good self-care practices. It's for sure, it's a big commitment between, just the Harvard studies alone. And, talking to some of my peers, I remember in first year, at least for me, and it seemed like that's when we're putting the most pressure on ourselves. And, now third year, we kind of figured it out. But I remember in first year that some of my peers were saying that they were close to burnout or close to, I wouldn't say nervous breakdown, but close to burnout, because there's a lot of expectations on us. And I felt for myself, I was doing the full course load as well as running a business, and I wasn't having the burnout. And I think it's because I really do have a very serious meditation practice and yoga practice, and I get 8 hours of sleep every night, and I hydrate and I get sunshine, I move my body, so all of these self-care things I think are really important, and that's what's helped me to manage the big workload. So that's what I would offer.
I can also say that in addition to having your own self-care practices, is the treasure of saying no. Being at Harvard, there's so many things going on, so many clubs to join, but I think having a set schedule of organization and avoiding the fear of missing out on something, I think that has actually helped me to not experience this burnout. Just being able to recognize what is a priority and what I can be okay with missing out on, if that means that I'm going to stay on top of my work and my other priorities. And so I would say having that organization, having a planner, and not being afraid to say no for things that just don't fit at the moment. You will not miss out, I promise.
I think, yeah, both of those are great advice, Jack and Shra. And I would add, just practically, I found it super helpful to do field ed the summer after my first year and do a CB unit. And then, which I think is fairly traditional, but there's all sorts of ways to do it. And to really kind of build that time in the summer for that. And then in the second year of the MDiv, yeah, like Shirai was saying, really guard your time. And if you need to take a few classes, SAT, which is basically pass fail, then go for it. The MDiv is very flexible with that. So just know your limits and plan financially as well. If you know you need field ed, that you need to be paid, figure out if you can get work study, figure out what organizations are willing to pay you, and set that up early on so you're not trying to juggle a job, school, and field ed.
I want to stay on this theme, but I want to broaden the question. The question was about how challenging is it to balance academics and field ed, but I want to broaden the question to what has been the most challenging. Let's just get right into the nitty-gritty. We want people to be making decisions with accurate information, with a full picture, with a real story. So HDS is great. It was the only place you all applied to. You got here, you got what you needed. All of that's wonderful, but keeping it real, what has been the most challenging for you here as a part of your MDiv program?
I can jump in again. I feel like it's been an internal pressure. Everybody here is so welcoming and so supportive and so loving and so compassionate, like so positive. I gotta say, I mean, Margaret and Dean Teddy are like two of the most positive, awesome people. And I'm not just saying that because you guys are here, but you both had such an impact on me with your positivity. Um, but I feel like it was like an internal pressure that I put on myself, and particularly in first year, somehow I felt like I needed to get straight A's. And you know what? I'll say in first year I did. I got straight A's, but I pushed myself a little bit too hard. So I feel like in second year and third year, I was able to back off. I'm still doing the reading, I'm still doing the assignment, I'm still doing everything, but in a smarter way, just like Sharia said, saying no to some opportunities, and just taking that pressure off. So I truly believe that we can navigate this program with the field ed, with the language requirements, with the course load, with a side job. It can be done in a healthy way. And it's just, we have to, at least for me, it seems, kind of take off some of that internal pressure and expectations.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think coming to HDS was such a leap of faith for me. And Dean Teddy, you mentioned a question about careers earlier, and I was like, oh God, like I don't want to answer that. I am interested in traditional chaplaincy, but I think a lot of people come to the MDiv program wanting different questions answered and really in this place of seeking. But it is a master's degree and it is a financial investment. And I clumsily mentioned I don't come from a faith background, but that means I'm always translating what I'm doing to my community and my family and my friends who don't know what the MDiv is. They don't know what chaplaincy is. Some of them don't know what ministry is. And then in the academic setting, you're always translating what you're doing. So I think it is really important to know why, have a lot of clarity as to why you want to come to HDS and do the MDiv program, and find a way to like hold on to that sense of purpose and direction while you're here. And then also why Harvard might be a question you want to ask. Last year was a lot of political strife, and I felt very disappointed often in the Harvard Corporation and the president. And I had to think like, why did I come to Harvard? Why didn't I seek someone in my community who could provide spiritual leadership? And I'm glad I came here, but that was a question I reckoned with in my second year, and you might want to think about before you come, because Harvard has a lot of baggage. It's a great name. It's a great institution. There's great people here, but there's a lot to coming to Harvard.
Definitely echoing the why Harvard question. I think people can really get caught up in the name, but I think definitely analyzing what makes you want to come here and what it is that you want to study. But I would also encourage you, like, if you don't fully know, but you see something here, I would definitely encourage you to apply. But I'm kind of taking us a little like to the side, like outside of everything that was just mentioned, y'all, it's expensive to live in Massachusetts. Like that's been my hardest part. Like I can get with the schoolwork, like that's not going to be a problem for me, but like you're paying, like if you don't have like a financial aid package, you're paying tuition twice, it feels like. And so depending on where you live and like all those things. But I think that has just been like the most challenging thing, is just like coming here, finding the apartment that works, finding the community that works, and just being able to pay your rent on top of if you're coming out of like pocket for school, books, etc. But yeah, I think for me, it's just like the financial commitment of like living. So I'm from Oklahoma, so like paying rent in Oklahoma looks different than paying rent in Massachusetts. So I think that was probably the most realistic challenge for me.
So I thank you all for responding to every single every question, all of you. What we're going to do now, I'm going to start to address specific questions to each of you so we can start running through some of these. The first one I'm going to actually take. There's a question about disability accommodations, and we have an assistant director for student services who works full-time in our student affairs office. Her name is Dreama Bowers. She is an incredibly skilled and experienced higher ed administrator, and she is our disability services coordinator as a part of her role. So every student who has a disability need can meet with Dreama and go through the process for receiving an accommodations acknowledgement. And when you get that accommodations acknowledgement, a letter goes to your professors indicating this student has the following accommodations have been approved for them, so that both the school knows what you need and we have documentation that says your faculty member knows what you need. And then that allows you to have an open conversation with your faculty member about the things that you need. In terms of going part-time, I will say that's probably a question for admissions. I will say there are some students who go part-time for some parts of the degree program, but there are some residency requirements in terms of your first year having to be sequential. And then if you go part-time, you have a certain number of years that you're allowed to take before you finish the degree program. So you can't go part-time indefinitely until you finish. But the specifics around that, I would address those to the admissions office, and they'll get you the precise answers that you need. This next question, I'm going to ask Jack to handle this one. And it's a student wondering, what is it like going back to divinity school at a later point in life, after already establishing a career, after already sort of building a life, and then pivoting and going back to school? What's that been like for you?
For me, I love it. I mean, because first I initially studied mechanical engineering, and I did it, to make my dad proud and to get a good job and get a good career, but it's not where my heart was. And, I started working at John Deere. I'm Canadian, moved down to Iowa, spent 10 years working for John Deere and got an MBA and was climbing the corporate ladder and, living the American dream, but it just wasn't my passion. And so then when I found yoga and started our yoga school, and got clarity that I wanted to bring more integrity to the school and come back as a student. I mean, now I'm sober now, 15 years. So like school in my 20s versus now in my mid 40s, very different experience. And studying something that I love, taking it very seriously, and something that's just like perfectly aligned with my vocation and my ministry. Like it blows my mind. I wake up every morning, and I know this isn't the case, some of you guys most of you are probably younger. It wasn't the case earlier in life, but now middle age, like I wake up every day, like pinch myself, so grateful. It's crazy that my spiritual practices, my academic studies, and my ministry are just perfectly aligned, and I'm doing what I love. I know that's not always going to be the case, but truly that's the case for me. And yeah, so for whoever asked, who is probably middle age or mid career, if you found the right professors and this is the right school, you're going to love it.
Thank you so much, Jack. Shariah, I'm going to ask you this next question. The person asks about the balance between theology, ethics, pastoral care, and practical ministry training. How does that show up in the curriculum, and how do you balance all of that? How has it been for you in terms of making sure that you have a balanced diet in your curricular choices?
Absolutely. I will say that there are just so many great classes to take. One of the cool things about being a student at Harvard is that you have access to all 12 graduate schools and even some undergraduate schools. And so being interested in law, like I've gotten to take courses at the law school, as it pertains to like ethics and pastoral care, I will say that field ed takes the cake on this one. I think that being able to be in a ministerial position, whether that's like at a church church, or for me, it was in a chaplaincy capacity. Like, I think that that has really prepared me. But we also have really amazing classes, kind of like Tess talked about, our spiritual care and counseling curriculum, just kind of like expanding. Right now, I'm in a class that is approaching spiritual care from the point of view of like psychology. And so like, I think that that's really like just been expansive for me. I think that for me, I am very much so interested in like theological studies. And I think that Harvard is very academic. And so I think it's been maybe a little more challenging to find classes that are like specifically focused on the theology of a scripture. But I've also gotten to take classes on like the New Testament and its history and like historical figures and things of that nature. So it's definitely like a place where you're going to learn more about what it is that you want to learn in terms of spiritual care, ethics, theology. It just might look a little different than if you were to go to like a theological seminary. But I will say, in terms of pastoral care and ethics, field ed has been the place where I've seen most of that come out to play, but also in my classwork. Like, for example, I'm almost done talking. Next semester, there's this class on business ethics. And so, like, I don't know, I think it has expanded, being at HDS has expanded my view of ethics. And so being able to apply ethics in a classroom, but then also on a basketball team as their chaplain, but then also in a hospital. One of my favorite memories from CPE this summer was being a part of our ethics committee. And so getting to study cases on actual patients who were having like ethical concerns, and being able to take the knowledge that I've gotten in the classroom from HDS to apply to these cases. Obviously, like, I wasn't like the main one like calling the shots, but having these like things to think about from the classroom, taking to the hospital, I think it's been very much so impactful. So definitely a great place to explore.
Next question is about how field ed placements are arranged. And I want to toss this one to Tess, because I think you've had two very different experiences, one in a very formal setting that was an institutional setting that was prescribed, and you've also had one where you created your own field ed placement. So you can talk about both of those processes. Can you share with us, Tess, what the field ed placement process looks like?
Sure. So that there are quite a number of official field ed sites that you can see on an HDS website somewhere. And one of the formal ones that I did that Dean Teddy mentioned was CPE, which is Clinical Pastoral Education Chair. I was just talking about it. And so there are accredited CPE sites across the country. And so I just went into the database of ACPE sites, and I looked for areas where I wanted to live over the summer, and site placements that seemed interesting to me. And I found the San Francisco Night Ministry, which does CPE and chaplaincy out on the streets in San Francisco, and does phone lines with people. So it was a little non-traditional in the sense that it wasn't in a hospital, but it was still an accredited CPE site. So we did all the things that someone in CPE would do, small groups, verbatims, those kind of chaplaincy training experiences. And so that was my more formal site, but I did have to set it up with the field ed office, as they hadn't worked directly with the night ministry. And then my second placement was what we called a student initiated site. And so that there has a lot of flexibility. So if you're looking at the list of what's available, you're not seeing anything that's really speaking to you or the way you want to develop your ministry, but you have something in mind, if it's a nonprofit or anything else. It's very broad. If you have an idea in mind, you can reach out to Lisette and Laura at the field ed office, and they will work with you to help you develop a student initiated site. So what I did was work in the Harvard Divinity School garden for a year, and that was a fortunate role because other students had done that, even though it wasn't an official site. So we had some kind of grease in the wheel for knowing how it would work, who the typical supervisor was for that, et cetera, where to find work study funding. So that was really nice for me. If you want to do student initiated, you'll have to think right away about who will be a supervisor for you, someone in the nonprofit or organization where you will work, who will meet with you once a week to do theological reflection. So you have to find the right person for that. But I found the right person, and I basically designed my own curriculum for what I wanted to learn in the arts and ministries that I wanted to accomplish. So that was really cool to balance the more formal CP, where it's kind of a rigid traditional outline, and then creating my own curriculum, which involved a little bit of reading, but mostly community organizing and some practical work in the garden.
Thank you, Tess. The next question is about, well, there are several questions that are around the issue of academic advising, access to professors, mentoring relationships with professors, and how they play a role in your professional development. So, Jack, I wonder if you might want to say a word about how you build relationships with your professors and what that academic advising experience is like.
Yeah, it's been really important for me. So Dean Teddy, you've been my academic advisor these past years, and it's actually been so helpful. Although you were the professor for one of our courses in first year, I've mostly been taking courses with Professor Clooney, which makes sense. So in a way, he's an unofficial academic advisor because I take a lot of his classes, but it's been so helpful to have you as my official advisor, who understands the MDiv program and understands the path. And you've helped me make big life decisions of when I'm thinking, do I want to do a PhD or not? What makes sense? And so I guess to answer the question, it's been super helpful to have access to mentors who are MDiv focused, but then also within, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever the path is, and very accessible. I can speak about Professor Clooney. We exchange emails regularly. We can meet. He has office hours every week. We can meet on any Wednesday. We met this past Sunday. I had a visitor from India in town, and so he took time on Sunday of a long weekend to meet. So I would say that professors can be very accessible. I'm sure everyone's a little bit different, but my experience has been that way, and it's super helpful to know we're not here. You're not alone. You won't be alone. Yeah, so I've appreciated that.
Thank you, Jack. And I probably should have thought about who I was going to ask that question to, because now it seems like I just called on you so you could talk great about me. But I was actually thinking about your relationship with Father Clooney. So I'm glad you brought him into the equation. He's been a great mentor for you. There's a question about student life. What is student life like, both in and out of the classroom? What's the environment like here? What do students do? How do they connect with each other? And I'm going to pass that question to Shariah Anderson, who was our president of the Harvard Divinity School Students Association last year. So I don't think we have a better person to answer the question on student life than someone who served as the president for our student association. So Shariah, please tell the folks what student life is like.
Wow. What a great question. I feel like Tess mentioned earlier, like last semester, last year was just kind of like a very different experience just due to the international affairs that were occurring. However, we have such a tight-knit community. I believe Tess and I met on like our first day of divinity school, and we've been friends since. I think that just like the events that they have for like incoming students, we have this thing called the Heart Effect event. And it's just like a time where you really get to understand your peers. And that is where like Tess and I connected and many of my other peers. And it was just like such a fun time. Outside of this, there are literally so many events that we have on campus, whether that is someone to come and like talk on a lecture. We have HDS trivia where you see so many different people that you probably haven't seen all week because of class schedules. We come together and eat pizza. Every Wednesday, we have a noon service, which is probably one of my favorite events that HDS does. It's basically where every tradition or non-tradition will have a service. And so that could look like any group of religious or non-religious people, just like engulfing everyone into whatever their practice is. And so it's really just like an experience in someone else's world, which I think is so intentional that HDS provides Outside of that, we have too many clubs to count, whether you are a Buddhist, Hindu, you enjoy playing music, like whatever. If you like to run, I just saw an event to join a club for running. But we just have so many different opportunities for people of all kinds to get together and do the things that they love. And so I would say that you'll definitely find your people here. And I feel like anytime I ever go into the comments, I am stuck there for at least 10 minutes because I'm just talking to someone that I know. And so I think that something that I find funny, I've spent a lot of time at the gym and like on the college campus and also at the law school. But anytime someone hears that I'm from the divinity school, they're like, oh, that's why you act like that. Like you're different. Like you're so nice. You're so inviting. And I think that that really speaks to the culture of HDS. I think that you will not meet someone that you like will have like an issue with. Like I think it's interesting to get so many people who are so different into one room and to just like be around. But it doesn't feel that way because I think HDS like really embodies this idea of like humanity and like what it means to be human. And I think that that's the way in which we find connection with one another. And so I would say that the student life is awesome. You'll definitely find your people, and if you don't, I will be very surprised. So our student life is really great.
Thank you so much, Soraya. There are a number of questions centered around wanting to hear more about your personal spiritual life, your spiritual growth, your spiritual practices, your spiritual formation. What does that look like at HDS, and how have things changed for you through the course of your MDiv program in terms of how you care for your spirit and how you practice? And there's also a question about what is the experience of being at divinity school if you're not affiliated with a particular religious tradition and yet you're at divinity school? What does that feel like? So I'm going to ask all of you to answer that question around spiritual practices, because I think it's good for people to see how the different responses will be. But I'm gonna pick on Tess to go first, because you mentioned that you didn't grow up particularly religious, and yet here you are in divinity school. So can you talk a little bit about how you think about spiritual formation in that context and how it's been for you at Harvard Divinity School?
Thanks, Steve and Teddy. Yeah, I'm excited for everyone to answer that question. For me, it has been so valuable to be with people in their faiths. Like Shariah mentioned, there's noon service every Wednesday, and that's led by a different student group or faith group on campus. And it is so meaningful to go there and share with people what they'd like to offer and share. I think that it is more and more typical to not have a spiritual or religious background coming to HGS. So you'll have company if you're like me and that's the case. And I think it just takes time to figure out who your people are, how you find those spiritual communities if you don't have them already. Last year, a few friends and I started what we call the Farmer Collective, and that has been kind of my spiritual community on campus. It's a group of people who loosely either have farmed or are interested in gardening or want to be connected with the land in some sort of way from all different backgrounds. And we meet and have a potluck every other week. And it's ended up being a social group. We also come up with events that we want to put on. But that has really felt like my people that I talk to when I'm like, hey, I'm kind of going through this crisis. I've lost my sense of purpose at HDS. Like, can we talk about it? So it's good to find those people and find a community like that. And I would say be kind to yourself. You're not an imposter for being here. Enjoy what other people are offering for you respectfully, and just let yourself become who you want to become. And if that's still not very spiritual and not very religious, that's okay too.
Jack, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'm happy to. This is, I mean, I found my path as a result of being here at HDS, and it wasn't planned. Like apparently there's a book. It's something like how I lost God or lost religion at Harvard Divinity School. There's some book, something like that. I'm the opposite. I found my path. I found my spiritual calling. And I'd like to share with the community here. So I applied to HDS first in 2021, and actually I didn't get in the first time. And well, I don't know why, but I believe it was because I didn't have a strong letter of recommendation. I didn't have any academic recommendations. So I used that next year to study, to audit some courses, to spend time with some professors, to earn a strong letter of recommendation. I share that as a tip for others who are maybe middle-aged. And in that process, I spent time and was guided by a particular professor who was very passionate and enthusiastic about Bhakti yoga. And I didn't plan it, but I really fell in love with this path. It's a very heart-centered practice of yoga. And it's really informed my whole 3 years here at HDS. So now it's like my personal spiritual practice. We're sharing it with our yoga community. Everything is Bhakti yoga. And so I feel like I've been divinely guided. And yeah, it's been the biggest blessing for my spiritual journey.
Thank you, Jack. Shariah?
Yeah, for me, I definitely came in with like a good idea of what I believed and why. But I think that being at HDS has really helped me to deconstruct and reconstruct different parts of my theology while also learning what it looks like to love my neighbor. Like, what does it look like to love someone who doesn't think like me, who doesn't believe the same thing as me, who might even have church hurt and have a lot of like negative things to say about what I believe? Like, what does that look like? And so I think for me, it's been a very interesting and fun experience to kind of like continue to add to what I believe, while also learning how to be a better believer in Christ and to show that love that I'm shown to other people daily. So it's been really transformative for me as well. Even though like I came in with my mind made up, I think that yeah, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I've spoken to people and they're like, well, what if I like lose my faith? But like I think Tess said, like you're going to evolve into the person that you are to become. And so if you do have that fear, I wouldn't hold on to that. I think that whatever is for you will not miss you. So I'm excited for whoever is interested. So.
Thank you each for sharing that. There's one question I did want to answer myself in terms of spiritual accompaniment, and particularly for those who are seeking ordination. We've been talking so much about all these other forms of ministry, which are outstanding and is one of the reasons why people come to HDS. But we do have people who want to go into congregational ministry. We do have people who want to serve traditional religious institutions. And what we have for people who have to figure out, how do I make sure that I'm not just taking advantage of everything that HDS has to offer, but I'm meeting the requirements that my religious institution is going to require of me in order to be ordained. And so the Office of Ministry Studies we have a number of guides and mentors. Right now, we call them denominational counselors. We have 12 of such counselors. We have 8 who are within the Christian tradition: Catholic, Baptist, Pentecostal, Episcopal, Lutheran, Presbyterian, several others. We also have a Muslim denominational counselor. We have a counselor for Jewish students. We have a counselor for Unitarian Universalist students. So there are people here who are, many of them came to HDS, some of them did not, but they're familiar with HDS, they know the program, and they also know what these students need in terms of being ready to go into ministry in these various traditions, and you work with them. But also, most of these groups also have student organizations associated with them. So people do sort of find their tribe, if you will. And for a lot of students, they don't know what that is until they get here. They might end up finding a tribe by experimenting or by belonging to multiple groups and then figuring out which one is the best for them. So a lot of the vocational preparation and spiritual formation happens through student organizations, but we also have professionals who will walk with you and help you understand how to do the formal procedures if you're looking at ordination in that regard. We've got only a few minutes left, and so I wish we could get to every single question. But I do want to end by letting our panelists just share a piece of advice for people who are in discernment about this process, knowing what you know about Harvard Divinity School. What would you leave with folks for them to think about as they continue on in their discernment? And I'm going to give you 1 second to think about what you're going to say. And while you think about what you're going to say, I want to share, please, please, please reach out to me if you have questions that have not been answered and you would like them answered, particularly if there are questions about the curriculum. We have an open curriculum, which means there are very few requirements. We have 3 requirements for MDiv students. The rest of the curriculum, you design yourself in coordination with your faculty advisor. So if there are questions you have about how we do that, you can address them to me. You can find my email on the website. You go to Ministry Studies, you click on my face, and it'll take you to my email address, and I would be happy to respond to those kinds of specific questions. You are also able to get in touch with admissions. They know everything about everything. But if you want to reach out to me, I just wanted to make sure you knew that you could do that. So with that, I want to give our panelists a final word to share with you all as you think about where you want to apply and perhaps where you want to study. We'll go in our original order. We'll start with Shariah and then Jack, and we'll finish up with Tess.
Awesome. I was going to offer a benediction, joking. But I would say if you don't have all of the answers, I would say apply anyway. I had so many questions and wasn't really sure what the end goal would be when applying to HDS, but I did it anyway. And now, like looking back, it's been 3 quick years and I have such clarity about my purpose, what I want to do, and who I am. And so if that is all you learn while at Divinity School is a better understanding of who you are, like you've won. And so I just want to encourage you to apply, even if you have doubts, even if you're unsure of what the future could look like. I could not tell you 3 years ago that this is where I would be or the things that I'm passionate about them. But I was just like curious and I applied. So I just want to encourage you to follow that curiosity and apply if that's what that leads you to.
Nice. I love that and totally agree. And at the same time, I would mention again what you said earlier, Shariah and Tess, to get clarity on your why. Like, why is it that you would want to be here? And I found the statement of purpose, the process of writing that super helpful, right? That's something that, I mean, I obsessed about it for like over a year because I didn't get in the first time, but I mean, just putting the thought into that and really thinking about it. Why do I want to do this? Which professors do I want to work with? What might I want to do with field ed? What language, Sanskrit for me. And I feel like just the application process, when what I did, I put a lot of time and effort into it. It just really helped with the discernment. So by the time I got here, I knew who I was and I knew what I wanted. I jumped in, I got the courses I wanted. So I think, although I totally agree with what Shreya just said, also the application process can really bring a lot of clarity. So take the time for that.
Yeah, I'll echo Jack and Shreya. I was gonna say, whatever your process is for discernment, really spend time doing that. For me, it's often writing a lot, and I think Jack's right that the application process will give you that opportunity. I think also like kind of vividly imagining what your life will be like. What might your commute be? Like, who are the people at HDS that you want to work with? Have you looked at professors? And feeling like what does that feel like, and having that to ground you and say, is this the right call? Is this my calling, and should I follow this curiosity? But yeah, echoing Shreya and Jack.
Well, Tess, Jack, Shariah, I just want to say thank you so much for spending this time with these prospective students. And thank you again to the admissions office, particularly Margaret Okada-Sheck, and John, who is in the background somewhere, I think, who helped do a lot of the tech for this. Thank you so much to you all. And Margaret, are you going to have a final word, or are we concluded?
That's it. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you to Dean Teddy and the panelists. We hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care.